Right, we're going to stay with the financial theme and look at the nitty-gritty, really, of how companies in the travel sector deal with the implementation of sustainability targets. And the basic framing of this session really is about whether regulation is driving or inhibiting change. Because often change appears through a series of events that end up looking like bureaucracy, but in fact it is the culmination of a series of actions that have great importance and impact on how we do business in the travel industry. If we look at something, and we're going to explain this, like double materiality reporting or dual materiality reporting in the EU, as a perfect example of how the development agencies and public corporations and governments have, in a way, laid the groundwork for sustainability. But as we heard from Bobby Demery just now, from Roche Ventures, some of these regulations are incomprehensible to most small and medium enterprises. So what are we going to do about it? Right, well, let's get our panel on stage. Can I please bring on Jehan, you saw him yesterday, Group Public Affairs Director, Europcar Mobility Group and MaaS Alliance Board Member. Welcome, Jehan, again. Can I also bring on, and you saw him yesterday, did you? Maybe not. Alastair Crossley, Global Head of Travel, AXA Partners. And you definitely saw her just earlier, Catherine Logan. Please come back on stage, Regional SVP, EMEA and APAC, GBTA. Okay, I mean, basically, bearing in mind that regulation does seem to be forcing companies to adapt and comply, we are asking you in this panel really to have in mind your position on this question of whether it's good or bad, and to have examples that have led you to have your opinions on this. But I want to start with a question for all of you. Change takes time. Where do you believe the best efforts are spent when trying to drive change in the travel industry? Where should you be focusing? Where should we all be focusing our efforts, in your view? Catherine, I'll start with you.
Okay, I do think it starts in terms of what change you need governments to change things. The regulations are the thing that creates the framework and the imperative for corporates to focus on this area, and then what they do is then they implement it. So, for instance, I've talked a lot about harmonisation of reporting. And the requirement to report and the way in which report, that makes a difference because then everybody's talking the same language and everybody's focusing on the same things. That then makes it important for corporates to implement something. We know that for many organisations, like reputational risk is a huge priority whenever it comes to sustainability, and so you've got those two sort of what would you say, major pressures that are forcing change in the private sector or in organisations around the world. And then that gets implemented into policy, which forces the change. So I think if it was just left up to people to do their own thing or companies to do their own thing, they would like to, they may intend to, but they just don't have the same imperative.
But you have caveats, and we'll go into that a bit later, about the problems that your members, for example, face. Yeah. Alastair, from your perspective.
Thanks, Rajan. A slightly different angle, and you're quite right, change takes time. The big question is, do we have time? We've heard over the last couple of days some of the stories and some of the presentations from the experts that have been up here to say we don't have that time. We need to act now and we need to do something now. And for me, the energy is best focused on the private sector, driving the private sector to make that change now before the regulation comes. Last week, AXA published the Future Risk Report. Not surprisingly, climate change was the number one risk that was highlighted across the survey output. Perhaps what's worrying is that the change in the confidence that the survey respondents have in government to make that change has dropped from 22% last year to just 5% in 2024.
Not good.
So, so there is no confidence that the governments can drive that change So we as the private sector need to be a force within that to make that change happen.
Okay, and we'll definitely come back to you about some of the initiatives that AXA are undertaking. Yes, John.
It is a difficult question, and in fact, on the past 2 days, we are trying to answering the question. But the reality is that our market, the travel industry, is extremely fragmented, and we are, and it has been said this morning, we are all waiting for the magical solution. And we are saying, okay, it will come from tech, whatever it is. Most likely, it will not come. It will be the addition of plenty of little things. Mm-hmm. And we have to do those little things because one by one, they are not big, but all together, they are big. And this is, I think it is our duty to work on very simple things. Thus, I will make the difference between B2B and B2C. And there, I will probably disagree with Bobby. Because B2B, it's much more easy to change the behavior because the travel manager, the company can not only influence, but force to change the behavior. On B2C, okay, you have a small proportion of people that are convinced, fair enough, but the vast majority, they will make their decision on the price. And we can see that at Europcar on the website when there is the sustainable offer. On the non-sustainable, you see the people moving from one offer to one offer, and then in the car group they want to select, at the end of the day, for B2C, they select the price. And this is something we have to work on too. And then you talk about the survey and the perception. When there are surveys, and when there are, I've seen plenty of surveys, people saying, yes, if there is transport public, car sharing, bicycling, sharing, whatever it is, a solution in my country, I am happy to give up my car. If it would have been true, my turnover would be at least 10 times what is it today. So it is taking long, and education is important too.
Okay, now I mentioned the issues of reporting, and particularly in terms of the EU directives. And Jehan, I know that you have recently completed the process of establishing your company's dual materiality reporting, which I referred to. Now, before we get to your demonstration, perhaps you should just explain to those who don't understand what that is. What is dual materiality reporting?
It's part of the presentation, so
okay,
if you don't
fine.
mind, it's because if not, I will repeat twice and we will lose some time. So.
Okay, well, I'm asking the right question anyway, so yeah, go ahead.
Do we have the press? I press the button. Next. Yes. Okay, so first of all, Europcar, we are not perfect, but we are taking it seriously, and I'm just taking 2 examples. The EcoVadis, where we are platinum with in the top 1%, and the Sustainalytics report also, where we are a 4 out of 400 transport companies, so still close to the 1%. So even if we are not perfect, we are doing the exercise, we are doing the effort. I will repeat most likely what has been said earlier, but as for lobbying, the more you repeat, the better it is. And CSRD aims to achieve transparency so we can have some real comparison on real data and not just sentences or statements that are not meaning that much. And it is necessary because unless your business is making a huge margin, a lot of cash, most likely one day or another, you will need some money. And if you are not aligned with the CSRD requirements, you will not get the money because financial institutions, they will invest in companies that are respecting the CSRD and that are making sense in their view. So there is, at the end of the day, no option, which is good. So the regulation for us, Europcar, so non-listed company, will take place or will be enforced next year. But we decided to do the exercise this year, the dry run, and I suggest that you do the dry run as soon as possible because at the end of the day it is somehow complex. And we are moving from the, of course there are the CSRD, the taxonomy, and we introduce the new standards, but what is important is that at the end of the day, it is involving new internal work. So new governance for non-financial data, you need to do the acculturation of the team, and it has been extremely interesting as exercise to have the managers involved in that. And you need your managers, not only the top management, but you need everybody to be involved in that. So some changes in terms of IT, obviously. Policies on action plan, because the big change with CSRD is not that you are saying something, is that you are putting in place a plan with some data, with some date, and this is what is making a change. And most likely you will have to mobilize extra resources, either they are external or internal, to help you, because as always with regulation, sometimes to times it's quite complicated, as we said earlier this morning. So it's still the ESG, so the environment, social governance, plus few cross-cutting, but I skip this slide. What we have done, of course at Europcar we were doing most of the companies the non-financial reporting, so already we had some framework, some ideas, but then you are doing the rating. So you go manager by manager, topic by topic, and you do the rating to see whether it is important or not. Then you select some your IRO, so the matters that are important, and you do have to prepare the plan. And what is double materiality assessment is very simple. Out of the different topics, if one is either impacting the climate or has a financial impact or are both, it is a double materiality assessment. So it's something that you will have to report. Either you impact the climate, either it will impact your finance. 2 examples. We are running cars. Of course, it does impact the climate because as soon as the car is running, it does. But financially, for example, with the climate change, we may imagine that in few years, in the south of Spain, there will be less visitors and less volume in a station because when it's 40 plus or 50 degrees, you are not willing to go to that destination anymore. So we have to think in advance how we are going to transform that location, and where we will move, where the business will move. So it is not. It is also in order to preserve and get your business more sustainable. So it has a double interest. I will not disclose all of them, but I am sharing with you some of the outcomes of the exercise we did. And in terms of double materiality, so either it impacts the climate, either it's a financial impact, and in the middle you have those who are both. So obviously the GHG emissions, the air pollution, the use of resources, and diversity and inclusion, that are important to us. And then we have the external discussion or interviews, because it's good to have the internal view, but it's good to make your finding challenged by other people. And we did that exercise, and this is where we get few good ideas to change the behavior of the customer or to change the relationship with our suppliers, because when you are buying 300,000 cars a year, it does have an impact if you change the way you do it. So I can only encourage you to do it. At the end of the day, would we have done all that without the regulation? That's probably the theme of the debate.
Do you think small companies with less resources than you could deal with that?
Yeah, everybody can deal with that. Then you can go deeper or less deeper. You may have the resource to hire an external consultant, because if you really want, if you have to do the reporting, if you are, if the law force you to do it, you will have to do it. So then you will need some resources, definitely, either internal or external. But if you don't have to report, you can still do the exercise, and just by doing the exercise, you do change the mentality of the people within the company, and you do enlarge the comprehension of the topic within the company. And for example, for us, it has been the opportunity to make sure that 100% of the people at the HQ have been through the frame of the climate. I forgot the name of the exercise. The climate frame. It doesn't matter. An exercise that is really explaining the issue we are facing with the climate.
Right. And you're suggesting as well that even if you're not obliged to do this. You're suggesting that companies do this because it's a good exercise and it'll actually put them in a better position in the future. Yep. Catherine, from your perspective, how do you react to those kind of reporting requirements? How would your members deal with that?
Well, I think it's how I react to it is I think it's really important, and I go back to, and it's a little bit what Nico was saying about his different bank accounts. Unless everybody is reporting the same things and accounting for things in the same way, there's no comparison, and it results in, everybody knows that this is an important issue, and they're looking at it, and it results in a reinvention of the wheel. Mm-hmm. So and also, let's face it, there's lots of chat about how do you really know what the emissions are for a flight from London to Paris? How can you know exactly? Because you don't know how many people took it, you don't know what aircraft it was, and so on and so on and so on. And actually, the exact calculation of that seat is not the important thing. The important thing is, as a corporation, are you looking at what you're doing? Are you making a fair and reasonable calculation as to the impact that has? And do you have a plan to reduce it? That's the important thing, not the nitty-gritty individual 0.9 whatever difference in that calculation. So therefore, I think that's really important. And to Jean's point about the looking to the future, I think that's critical, and I think any business should be doing that. We can see. I talked a little bit about sort of like extreme weather events and so on. About the fact that you used to be guaranteed certain types of weather and certain types of destinations. That's no longer the case. So I think any business needs to be looking ahead and considering these things. But once it does that, it needs to also come up with a plan to what it's going to do as a result of that, a plan to reduce emissions. And I talked a bit about in implementing really serious or implementing sustainability seriously into procurement standards or into your procurement processes. So that's about having the questions, actually using the information that's received, and then actually making that contractually binding, so that it's not a nice question we ask and then we totally ignore because we're just basing it on price, but it's something that's an integral part of the process.
Alastair, I think AXA again are ahead of the game and are looking at solutions, looking at ways to achieve what we all want to achieve. Just can you give me some examples of what you're doing there, some of the initiatives that you've now got?
Yes, happy to. And I think going back to the point about regulation, it plays a very important role. But if you really want to make change, you need to be ahead of that regulation. You need to be implementing the changes before it comes and not playing catch up when it does arrive. And the insurance industry has a unique opportunity to play a strong role in recognizing the impact of climate change and trying to understand some of the mitigating actions with the vast amounts of claims data that we have as an industry, with our skills in risk management expertise, with the significant investments that we've got as an industry. We can really make some change. And I think one example from AXA is that in the last decade, the decision was taken on the basis that we could see the impact on climate change. We could see that unchecked, we could be entering a scenario where the world was uninsurable and therefore everybody loses. And so AXA started to take some action. So, for example, divesting its investments in oil, coal, gas, looking at green energy solutions for its investments, understanding how we could put underwriting restrictions on some of those heavy industries whilst freeing them up on some of the more energy efficient industries, and really trying to make a change at a sort of quite a macro level in terms of what we are able to do. Taking that one step forward, to your point, Catherine, you were guaranteed certain weather in certain parts of the country or certain parts of the world. And what we're looking now is to try and understand how can we leverage the data that we've got to provide travellers with solutions that protect them when they don't get the guaranteed weather. So, for example, you might be a family, book a holiday 10 days here in Spain, beautiful Spain, expect 10 days of wall-to-wall sunshine. If that doesn't come because 2 or 3 days it's raining, what do you do? Well, we're looking at solutions that make instant payout so that you can use that money, that claim, to take your children to an indoor event. So you can occupy them indoors, you can give them something to do. So these are the sorts of parametric type solutions that we're looking at to really try and make a change, to deal with the fact that actually what was predictable 10, 15, 20 years ago is now no longer predictable.
What about rising temperatures? What about the issue that some places are going to have heat waves when you arrive there? How are you dealing with that in terms of insurance?
We are. I mean, the heat wave piece has a direct impact on traveller health, and that's dealt with through our medical networks and the solutions we can provide. But I mean, taking it one step further and looking at it at a strategic level, can we envisage a scenario where we will be pricing the travel insurance based on the specific destination because of excessive heat or because of large-scale losses like flooding, for example? Absolutely. That's on the horizon. We're looking at the data that we've got now to understand how we can ensure that we price effectively for those additional risks. So it could be increasing wildfires, for example, which we've seen more prevalent over the last couple of years. Will that be enough to drive consumer behaviour change? Possibly not, because I don't think the cost of insurance at an individual level is something that's going to drive that change, but it's a factor in that, and that's what we all have a role to play. We all have a factor that we can play, and that's part of what we'll be doing.
And Jehan, I mean, in terms of, for example, the adoption of EV vehicles, people using vehicles, what have you found in your experience?
We found that there is no demand.
Right.
That's simple. There is no demand. We subscribed to a green bond a few years ago, and we said that by the end of this year, we will get 20% of electrified cars. We will not achieve the 20%. We will be close to the result, so it will have a financial impact, obviously. But the financial impact would have been even more important if we would have got those 20% of EVs, because if you are buying cars that are 40% more expensive and then no one is using, you have a problem. So we have to work on the problem, how to make sure that people are going to adopt the EV. It will take some time. Regulation will help, and the main issue is that, in fact, we realize that in EV for employees, for your Europcar employees, or when it is your company car or your own car, it's very simple, because you know where you live, and you know where your office is, and you know the trip, and you know where to recharge. When you are renting a car, by definition, it is not where you are living, or you go somewhere else, or even worse, you are traveling. Worse for a travel industry is not probably the right word, but you are traveling even abroad. And as I said yesterday, I have an EV, and for me it's super. It's a pleasure, and it's easy because I go to the office, I can charge the car there. But if I have to travel to Germany or to Denmark or to Italy, whatever it is, a language I do not speak, I will be there. At the airport, they will propose me to rent an EV, and I will say no. I will say no because after a few kilometers, I will be in a station, and I will have a charging pole, and there I will take my credit card. You cannot pay with credit card. It will change because now the new directive of the European Commission is forcing the station to accept the credit card, but it's not yet the case. So I will be in front of the German pole with a German explanation, asking me to download a German app. No way. No way. No one will do that. It's just impossible. It's not that people do not want, but it's just impossible. So in between, we decided to enlarge the fleet of hybrid vehicle and plug-in. But you know the danger of plug-in is that people are not charging the car. So what we decided to do is to give an incentive to the people that are renting hybrid plug-in and that are charging the car. And this we can easily control because all cars are now connected, so it's really easy to have access to the car. So that's that very small step, but we need to do all those small steps. But unfortunately, it is taking time. Yes.
And Catherine, excuse me, from your perspective on that, how high is sustainability as a priority amongst your members, GBTA?
Well, over 90% have stated that sustainability is a priority, but BCD released some research this week that said only 4% of business travellers are considering sustainable options whenever booking a flight.
So it's the customers, yeah.
So this is, so I think for the corporations, it's a priority for all of the reasons that we have discussed. For the travellers themselves, exactly to your point, Jehan, they are thinking about how much is it costing. They're thinking about what's going to work on my trip. And yeah, while I love the idea of an EV, would I take one if I was going somewhere that I don't know? Absolutely not. It would be concerning. So, but I think that this is where corporations, through their what's available in booking tools, where the travel what says in the travel policy. For instance, if every time you're going on a one-day trip, you've got to get additional permission for that, because why should you be going on a trip for one day? You should be making more of that journey. Or if you're traveling somewhere where you can easily get a train instead of a plane, that again, there are additional permissions required. That's where you've got the government regulation that is driving the corporate policy, which the corporate policy is the thing that's going to change the booking behaviour. So I think, as I say, for organisations, it's definitely a priority. For the travellers, they may have more pressing things that they're thinking about.
And how do you change that mindset amongst the travellers, in your view?
It's about making it really easy for them to make the right choice. Then there's some organisations who've also introduced things like a carbon levy or a carbon budget. So there's an additional cost factor to think about again. But so for instance, if you're going on and you're booking a journey, and it's very visible the emissions in the different routes, it's very easy to book a rail versus a plane or a combination of rail and air. And if you know that you're going to get a question from your manager if you're doing something outside of policy, or indeed you need to get additional permissions, those are all things that will nudge the correct behaviour.
And that's exactly what you're in the business of doing. It's encouraging your customers to with carrots and sticks, I suppose, to a certain extent, in terms of how much are you paying for your insurance, what do you do in order to follow the sustainable path. You can actually literally do that with your insurance policies.
We can within reason, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the insurance industry is very heavily regulated, and so we have to be careful in terms of how we price, because you have to price the same risk at the same price. So risk is essentially made up of frequency and severity. If something is more likely to happen, that'll have an increased price. Or if it's likely to happen at the same frequency but with a higher cost associated with it, then again you can increase that too. So for example, go back to my previous example, if take frequency for example, if somebody from Seville was travelling to the UK versus somebody travelling to the US, the frequency of them taking ill probably identical. The severity, however, the cost of the medical expenses in the US will be far higher than they would be in the UK. So that's an instance where actually severity plays a big impact on price. When we start to look at environmental impact and things like that, then absolutely, if customers are traveling to areas where we see a higher frequency of claim, because maybe there's greater large loss events, then yes, that will be built into pricing. If we see greater severity, so for example, we did see this after the pandemic when the airline industry was just starting to come back, the logistical structure was not there yet, and we saw a much greater level of large loss when it came to baggage claims and things like that. But yes, we can build that into the pricing, and I think that is where we will be going in terms of risk-based pricing. It's there for medical now and has been there for many, many years. People expect that, they understand that, they know that if they travel to the US, their medical bills will be much higher than if they travel to Europe. it's changing the mindset to understand that if they travel to an area where there's greater risk of environmental threat, then they may have to pay for that through their insurance.
I mean, what about the situation, maybe this is quite radical, but where, as part of your insurance scheme, if the customer is following a green path, if they, for example, are using a plane that has sustainable fuel, how possible is it for you to incorporate that in terms of your policies?
It's not impossible. We have to relate it to risk. So, for example, we would use the data that we would understand from the customer base to see, do those customers represent a lower frequency of claim or a lower severity of claim when they do need to make a claim? And that's really what it comes down to. We can't just incentivize because they've taken a green airline versus a non-green airline, because then we'd be breaching the regulation.
But you do encourage people to use EVs, don't you, or public transport?
We can do from a roadside perspective. We can do, and we work a lot with Europcar. We buy a lot of their product when customers' cars break down and we need to repatriate them and move them on somewhere else. But we do try and encourage them to use green solutions. So, but ultimately that's around a claim payout. It's to saying you've got X amount of money. Do you want to invest or use that money to take one of Europcar's vehicles, or actually do you want to use it to go on the metro or the tube or to use public transport? So we can do that from a roadside assistance perspective. It's a bit more difficult upfront pricing before a claim has been made to build it in, because that's far more regulated.
And I want to kind of just ask all three of you here, then I'll be back to the kind of original question, which is, if the government legislation, if the reporting requirements are so stringent and that you are fined if you don't follow them, that is ultimately going to achieve what we want, right? I mean, back to carrot and stick. The stick will surely make companies fall in line.
Yeah, we have seen that with GDPR. I mean, everybody is respecting GDPR today, so that's part of the solution, even if I don't like to say that. But for me, the main goal and the main benefit of the regulation is really the harmonization and the standardization. And as long as we are speaking the same language, as long as we can compare, we can make a real choice. And this is what is making the difference. At the same time, sometimes some regulations could have a counter impact. I'm taking, for example, what is discussed at the moment at EU level, the EV mandate. EV mandate for corporate fleet for your employees is perfect. EV mandate for a car rental company that also have car sharing activity, where every single car replaces 5 to 10, 12 cars, depending on the studies. So if there is an EV mandate, there will be a bad impact, non-expected, because car rental companies will just keep the car longer. Today, it is a nonsense to have too much or too many EVs. We need to have the right threshold, and we need to have a target that is achievable.
Catherine, carrot and stick issue. If your members are saying, look, we're going to have to pay fines unless we do this stuff, isn't that going to work ultimately?
I think that the reporting and the transparency, that is the thing that or the regulations, that's the thing that sets the challenge. The private sector has to come up with a solution, and I think that sometimes if it gets too granular, like what you're saying, Jehan, about sort of a mandate, EV mandate on car rental, that can that sort of thing can cause more issues. So it definitely has its place. It will definitely drive change, but it's got to be that thing where it's well thought through, and it isn't going to be something that is trying to dictate the answer instead of thrown over to the people who are actually having to implement it.
There has to be the willpower, the desire on the ground level to do this.
Well, I just think there has to be the opportunity to come up with a solution that's going to get us there.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to wrap it up now. But if there are people here who are facing some of these issues or who are having problems with this, I'm sure that each of you would be happy to engage with them. Certainly, Jehan, because you've gone through a lot of these processes. So please, can you thank my panel here, Jehan, Alastair, and Catherine, for the presentation.